part 3 of my 3-part series. So we're going to interview Darius Englen for Josephine County Clerk. Let's get into it. Got Darius Englen here with me, and you are running for County Clerk.
That's right.
So what made you decide to run for County Clerk?
So really, when February came around and I realized we've got to do something in this county, I really want to try to help fix up that clerk's office. There's something going on. Everybody knows it across the country. It's not just the county.
Yeah.
It's across the country that elections especially, right, primarily elections, we really need to investigate our current system and see, is it truly viable?
Yeah.
Because we've been using it now here in Oregon for over 27 years.
I thought it was 40 years.
No, it was 1998 was the first year, I believe. We should triple check that.
Yeah.
But I believe that was the first year that we ran the all mail-in voting here in Oregon.
Okay.
So the law, I think, was passed in 95 or 96, and then it got implemented. I think 98 was the first election. But and I had just come back from the U.S. Navy at that time. My wife and I resigned my commission in the Navy, came back in 96, and I remember that next election was the last time that I voted in person on paper.
So you had to go to the voting booth and show your ID, and
right.
You would, and those were where were those located?
So, well, let's get back to that in just a second.
Okay.
So I wanted to say something more about why I was running for clerk. So I've been an IT guy for over 30 years. So I've been in IT security, data systems, network security, system security, network administration, and when I visited the clerk's office in the past couple of years, having other issues that were going on, and I went over to visit and ask questions.
Yeah.
I discovered very quickly that there's a lack of knowledge of the security or data security. And I wouldn't say it's due to negligence. I wouldn't say that about the current clerk, but it's just that experience and understanding of technical systems, how data flows technically, where it goes, where it could go, how networks can be infiltrated, how simple it is, how easy it is, how common it is. All of that was missing. And it was missing, I think, again, just because a lot of clerks, I would say probably the majority of clerks by far, have not been IT professionals.
Yeah.
They're not data security analysts, they're not systems analysts, they're not engineers, they're not systems engineers. And that's my background. Right. After I got out of the U.S. Navy in 1996, then I did consulting and various other IT. I was IT director for a couple different companies and did consulting for small and medium-sized businesses, about 200 of them here in the Rogue Valley during those 30 years. And that really gave me a perspective on the potential for disaster in our elections across the country, but here in Josephine County. So that's a big part of why I want to get in there to be clerk. But another reason is because I love customer service. I love helping people. I've almost always had a job where I was in service. In fact, I think every single one of my jobs has been a service job when I look back. And customer service, making people pleased with whatever service that is a huge talent of mine, ability, because I can serve. I like to serve. So I think that encapsulates it for the most part, why I want to get in there and help fix up the clerk's office.
So more secure. So, I know Rihanna, she just basically keeps the votes in a locked, she has a thumb drive, right? And she puts it into a locked cabinet. But you're thinking more of like a two-factor authentication where there's two people, like in the Navy. You'd have two people that had the same thing.
Right, and one can't do it alone.
Right.
That's a big part of it. I mentioned that in a forum recently about two-person integrity. TPI is what the Navy tagged that with, and I think that's important. And when the clerk mentions that I'm the only one with the key, I'm the only one with access, and I'm the one that goes and gets the ballots, and I'm thinking, wow, those are all actually failure points.
Right. Yeah.
In a system, when you analyze it from the outside, you can't look at the character of the person, believe it or not. When you analyze a system, you don't look at the person. right? You have to look at the system. So you look to see, hey, we don't know that person.
Yeah.
So you have to look at it without looking at the person, and you say, what is a good way to do this?
Okay.
What is the safest way to do this? So
Yeah. So
what were we going to get back to?
Well,
I didn't want to cut you off, but I did.
I was asking, I think, but what's your wife think about you running for clerk? I mean, it's going to take you away from your family. I mean, that's kind of a full-time job over there, right? Maybe even more than full-time. It's 40, 60 hours a week, and
yeah. So my wife is behind me, I think, far more than I thought she was going to be, because running for office, that would be the touchy part.
Yeah.
Working for the county and working in the clerk's office, my wife's happy about that. One, because it's local. I'm not out at sea somewhere like in the Navy when I'd be gone for 6 months and going around the world, and or not like in Salem. Because working for the legislative assistant job that I am right now.
Okay, so you're legislative assistant for Senator Robinson. Is
Right.
that correct?
Currently, since January 2025, I've been working for Senator Robinson as his legislative assistant. So I had to be in Salem in 2025 for 6 months solid.
Wow.
I came back for the weekend, but I had my RV and was living in the RV up there in Silverton and going to Salem every day. She's happy about me being in town.
Should be local, yeah.
Yeah, but I work for the senator here in town too. Across the street from the courthouse. So when the legislature is not in session,
would you keep that job? I mean, would you have to give up your job as?
Oh yeah,
assistant?
for sure.
Okay.
Oh yeah, because that's a full-time job, and the clerk's a full-time job.
I see.
So yeah, no, I would unfortunately have to leave Senator Robinson's service. And he's aware of that. He's probably rooting for me not to be clerk. I don't know. He's let me know that I do a great job for him. But my wife's in favor of me doing this, and we know it's stepping out. We have an incumbent that we're going against. She's been in there over 20 years, so she's been she's been in that office, and that's not easy, taking out an incumbent. And it could be it all feels like a waste if you lose, right? You put money, time, effort, sweat equity, and lack of sleep. You put all that into a campaign, and then you lose. Mm-hmm. So there's that. And she's concerned about that too, a little bit.
So Darius, election integrity, what are your thoughts on that? And I know that there's a lot of people out there that are saying, the election system is fine. And they're saying there's nothing wrong with it, or it's a 0.0058 chance of having mishaps or whatever.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that? And here locally, 98. What do we have? 98,000 voters.
No, 72.
71
something.
Okay.
Registered voters, yeah.
And so, like election integrity within Josephine County, I mean, I get the grand picture that you have thoughts on that, the grand picture of. But what about election integrity in Josephine County, and how do you want to fix that?
Right. So obviously, it's a huge topic. Like I mentioned, it's one of the main reasons why I want to try to get in and help in the clerk's office. And it is. I mean, it's not just that I have an inordinate focus on that. It's that the whole country has a focus on election security or election integrity.
Depending on who's winning or losing.
It does. That's right. That's right. So I've been to 2 forums recently, and I think I might have told you about this off camera sometime in the past. But both those forums, when I mentioned that I'm in favor of the movement to end vote by mail, there were audible gasps from the room.
Right.
So they were both what we can fairly say were liberal audiences.
For sure.
And, both times there's 45 people in one, and maybe there might have been close to about the same. So both times the rooms had about 40-some people in it. And it was audible to hear that they were shocked that I was in favor of ending vote by mail.
Yeah.
So I really feel like if you were to draw a diagram, and had I known that this was kind of impromptu, so I didn't bring a chart or anything, but we could actually put together a chart, and I can kind of envision this chart that would show the ballot the continuation or the movement from a ballot. And actually, right before the ballot is also very important with mail-in voting. So in a normal voting situation, not like we have here in Josephine County in Oregon, the ballot is really somewhat insignificant until someone signs in for it. And then it becomes their ballot. So they go into a voting. That's what it was. You asked me about going into the voting center and what was that like.
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
And that's
Yeah,
right.
what happened before. Yeah,
what happened
exactly.
before, right.
Yeah.
So we can tie that in right here. So so you would walk in and you would show an ID or not, because you didn't always have to show an ID. But typically they'd want to see you are who you say you are. And they'd have the voter rolls on a large printout. Usually they were the old tractor feed green bar paper, it was called, report paper.
Wow.
Yeah, that's typically what they had for decades.
Dot
they had
matrix.
That. Yeah, dot matrix printer, exactly. They're called line printers because they print the whole line at once.
Right.
So, but anyway, they'd have those, and the election worker would be there, volunteer, would be there, look up your name on that report. You know, there might be 100 names, you know, per stack that they have, alphabetical order. And they would find your name, and then there's a place over to the right where you sign. And so you sign your name, and they look at that, and they have the signature cards right there in little 3x5 cards. So they actually have a copy of your signature, and they confirm, yep. And they hopefully look at your ID. Yep, that's you. They take a ballot, a fresh ballot, out of their box of ballots there, and they issue you that ballot. So now you have a ballot, doesn't have your name on it or anything, doesn't have any, it's just the ballot.
Right.
And so then you take that over to the booth and you fill it out, and you come back, and when you go to check out, you have to check out who you are. So they have another place at the out door.
Yeah.
And you sign out.
Wow.
Same thing on right your name, and you sign out. Your ballot goes into a clear box, and that's it. It's a clear locked box sitting there with two people watching it. And that ballot, from the time it was blank and went into your hand, it didn't leave your hand until you came back after it was filled out, and you put it in a clear box. And then the two people or more that are assigned to watching that box, that ballot doesn't have a chance to be stolen,
Right.
overwritten, lost, anything.
Okay.
And then later that night, when the end of that shift, which is only one day, by the way, it's 1 day voting, a group of people, 5-6 people that are signed up, you know, to do the voting, the ballot counting, they actually take the ballots out and they literally hand count those ballots on tally sheets. And there'd be 3 people counting the same ballot. So they have 3 people integrity. Like we talked about earlier,
Right.
2-person integrity, you have like 3 people, 4 people integrity.
Wow.
Because you actually, all at once, you count the ballots together, you pass them down one after the next. You know, you wait till the guy's done. Everybody has to wait for everybody, but you don't do piles. Everybody has to stay together, and you do all. That's how you tally that. That's one of the ways. There's several, but that integrity, that ballot integrity, and they call it chain of custody. So you have chain of custody from the empty ballot to the voter, back into that box. That chain of custody, there's nowhere for it to break.
Got it.
You count it right there. Look at what we have in Oregon. There's a central database that the Secretary of State keeps track of all of the registered voters.
Is that Eric?
Eric is used to be supposedly the third-party company that helps maintain the cleanliness of the rolls. They're the ones who have been shown to be failing.
Right.
Majorly failing.
People have fired Eric. What is that?
Yeah, several counties have fired Eric.
What does the Eric stand for? It was I'll put that on the screen below.
Yeah.
The Eric's stand for.
I do
but
forget.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it had to do with the consistency of the data, and they were supposed to be doing that, but they've done a terrible job in several states. It's been documented, so I'm not throwing any slander around, right?
Sure.
It's been proven,
Right.
right? And then they've lost cases and they've been fired. So, or let's just say it this way: their contracts weren't renewed.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
So, first of all, there's a centralized database. Now, how that data gets into that database is a problem. That data can come from a clerk's office. So someone can come in, fill out a registration to vote, hand it into the clerk physically across the counter, Clerk has it. Clerk can enter it into that database remotely. It's like that database is housed in the state cloud, run by the Secretary of State, whoever they hired. I don't know if that's internal or Oregon State, state of Oregon IT or not, by the way.
Yeah.
It very well could be. I visited the center in Salem, the IT data center that's in Salem. I visited that, and they didn't tell us all the clients in the government that use it, but that's growing. Their internal usage is growing because not everything in all the state departments use that IT center, and I don't know that the Secretary of State does. I think it does. He does. Tobias Reed does, but I don't know that. So anyway, so that central database has that input from the clerk's office, the DMV system, because the DMV with motor voter law that passed so many decades ago, and Oregon's implemented that fewer decades ago, but the DMV's taken voter database entries and sending them up to the Secretary of State. And then the Secretary of State has a website, OregonVotes.gov, where you can sign up to vote. By the way, if you go look at that, that's another big hole. So I'm talking about problems, right? Because you asked me about problems here in Josephine County. Well, problems here in Josephine County come from the whole state, right? All the DMVs, any DMV anywhere, really. It's not just Josephine County DMV, not just the one over there, on Beacon, but also the Secretary of State system. So if you go to that website, like I was saying, OregonVotes.gov, you can register to vote very simply with just a couple pieces of information. And there's no, the important thing is, people love, it should be simple to vote. It should be simple to register to vote. I totally agree. It should be simple to register to vote. But what it shouldn't be is insecure.
Yeah.
And it is insecure because if you look at it, you don't have to validate who you are filling out that form on the screen.
No, you don't.
It doesn't ask you for like a utility bill to show where you live.
Or social security number.
It doesn't ask you for your social security number or even the last four of your social security number. It doesn't ask you for that. And you need a birth date, a first and last name, and an address that you can put down.
And off you go.
And boom, you're registered. So, if you think about it too, people could do that from anywhere in the world.
Right.
Literally, other states, other countries, other nations, other continents. So that's a big problem for the clerk in Josephine County, because the clerk in Josephine County is relying on that database to be legitimate for anybody in the jurisdiction of Josephine County. So that's where the problem starts.
Okay.
So, but then the Secretary of State has to manage that database and have security over that database. The clerk does not. That's a problem. Because the clerk, if you look at the clerk's duties and responsibilities that the clerk is elected to do, one of them, and it's a big one, and just generically, it's to maintain a voting system that is legitimate.
Yeah.
So manage, watch over it, operate it, but it's the clerk's duty. Believe it or not, it's not actually the Secretary of State's duty.
It's the clerk's.
It's the clerk's duty.
Wow.
So each clerk, we have 36 counties in Oregon, and each clerk has the authority and the responsibility for that election. The Secretary of State, as the function of the state government, is required to have oversight as part of, even from the Constitution, that says that the states will and have the duty to run elections.
Yeah.
And so the state, that's where it's held, is in the Secretary of State's office. So, but that responsibility, or you know what it's like to have a responsibility for something, but not the authority?
Oh, yeah.
That breaks. So like in Management Training 101, if you're setting up a company and you want to have a good department, just as like a department, right? The clerk's office is like a department within the government. You need to give that supervisor or manager or department head, you need to give them both responsibility for it and authority. Because if they don't have the authority to be responsible, it'll break.
Yeah.
Not only will you have dysfunction, you'll have a bad system that accountability doesn't happen because they don't have the authority. The authority comes from somewhere else, and so they can always blame that. It's broken. So you need to have both. And with Oregon's system and vote by mail, and already the brokenness that I've mentioned, it falls flat. And so that's the very start of the problem. So then you have the Secretary of State, when it's time to conduct an election, like right now, right?
Yeah.
The ballots were received, most of them here in Josephine County were received yesterday.
Right.
There might be some receiving them today, I would imagine. But those come from the clerk's office. They are especially printed, and the clerk signs off for those, picks them up from the printer. She explained that actually the other day. I thought that was interesting. That was one of those cases where she alone has the key for it and opens the box and stuff. So, but those are printed here locally. But the voter's pamphlet is printed by the Secretary of State, so there's some cooperation there, and that's okay. That's secure, and that's fine. But now those ballots, where do those addresses come from? These got mailed out to 71,000 voters here in Josephine County. The addresses come from that Secretary of State database.
Yep.
And those addresses are printed on those envelopes. So whatever was in that Secretary of State system, from all the various ways that people can make entries into that system, they have a envelope printed for them and a ballot for that precinct, right? It's down to the precinct level that each ballot, because I don't know if people understand, but there's like, I don't know this election, but there can be like 47 different ballots. And I think if there's a precinct committee person running for the Democrat or the Republican Party in every one of those 47 precincts, then that would itself demand that there's 47 different ballots that go out.
That's a lot. That's a lot of resources.
Yeah, it's a lot of resources, a lot of management and all that. But all that comes from that data set that comes from the Secretary of State's office. And again, the clerk's like, oh, I just deal, because the clerk's like hands off for all that, which they shouldn't be, in my opinion.
Yeah.
They just say, hey, I just deal with whatever data comes from the Secretary of State's office.
They just trust it. Yeah.
Yeah, and those ballots just go out, right? The clerk doesn't have, it's too late, really, for the clerk to say, hey, is this a valid ballot? Like, I don't know that this ballot really should be printed. It's too late for that.
Yeah.
The database says, hey, these are all valid voters. And the way the system's set up, those are all valid voters. And she doesn't have, or he, the clerk, doesn't have the ability to say, that's not a invalid
They can't do that.
voter. Yeah, they can't do that. So that's broken because garbage in, garbage out, right? Garbage in equals garbage out. Or that whole thing from data management, and people know that from doing data entry. If you put garbage in, the system's not going to fix it and make it better.
No.
It's just garbage comes out. So you get all of these ballots mailed out. Clerk's kind of like, hey, it's not my job, and then they start coming back in. Who knows? Okay, so here's some more holes. It goes into the mail. So now remember that we talked about the people sign in for their ballot.
Right.
And they carry their ballot.
Yeah.
And then they fill it out and they carry it back and they put it in the clear plastic locked box. That ballot chain of custody is visible. It can't go wrong, really.
Right.
I mean, you literally have to like make a paper airplane and throw it in the trash or, something between that desk and coming back, right? So, but now coming back to reality here in Oregon, mail-in voting, the ballot is going to go into the mail system.
Yeah. And
it's sitting in bins and bins and bins. 71,000 ballots are in all these bins. And people are walking by. Are they always locked up all the time? 2-person integrity?
Probably not.
Maybe even 1-person integrity.
Yeah.
Like, I think they're probably left alone.
Sure.
They're not supervised. And they're heading out. They start getting through the mail system. They go through machines. Do they make it through all machines? Do they get ripped? Do they get threaded? Can somebody along the line take one or two? Who would know, right? Then they go into I'm skipping a bunch of steps that they have to get processed. They have to get sorted. They go into bins. They go into trucks. Somebody's hauling around in trucks. The guy's having lunch, whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, just name it.
Yeah.
So they're going out. They're trying to get all those ballots out to all the mailboxes. You got mail carriers. You got mail carrier bags, boxes. Are they always being watched? Here's the other thing: is that ballots could be inserted from somewhere else.
Right. Sure.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because if you can get a ballot into the chain, right? A broken chain. I call it a broken chain of custody.
Yep.
But if you can get a new ballot brought in from XYZ, any bad customer.
It'd be easy to do.
You know,
Yeah, it'd be
yeah,
easy.
it wouldn't be hard to do to make a ballot. The ballots are, especially once some people have them in their hand and they have like a genuine ballot, it could be copied a different way. I don't know if you're sophisticated printer, whatever. They're not serialized,
Right.
you know,
Interesting.
right
I
now.
didn't know that.
So, so you have ballots going out there all over the countryside, and then you put them in a mailbox. So there's all kinds of different mail situations. There's mail slots, you know, indoors. There's mail boxes. There's of course post office boxes. People have access to group boxes in apartments and things like that, where they open a big door and they have different slots. I mean, so there's all kinds of different ways that a ballot now, again, without two-person integrity or even integrity, nobody's watching them.
Yep.
Some other bad actor has opportunities to either take ballots, insert ballots, whatever.
Ballot stuffing, essentially. It was the old methods.
Well, to collect ballots,
Right.
you can take them and then you can fill them all out and put them all in, right?
Yeah, wow.
So yeah, it goes on. But right, so even when somebody picks up the mail, they could lose it on the way home before they fill it out. They leave it on the table. It can get lost, whatever. Kids can mess with it, you know, dogs, pets,
Yep.
whatever. It's like the ballots in our system, the ballots just don't matter. And security on the ballots don't matter. There's so many holes. And so people fill them out. They go to put them back. They go to return them. They drop them in boxes that aren't watched out
Right.
in Murphy,
Yep.
over in Merlin. You know,
Anywhere.
there's-
Yeah.
these places. There's nobody there watching those. And they could be putting, again, you can always insert more. You can make, you know, somehow, again, counterfeit ballots. Is it possible? I think so. But again, you don't have the integrity that all these other states do, by the way. All these other states are they do it like the system I was explaining,
Yeah.
or they do electronic,
Yeah.
right? A lot of them are electronic, but still here's your ballot, go fill it out, put it through a scanner. So a lot of them are paper, and then they scan them in at the end after they fill them out. And there's all these other methods, but mail-in voting has this constant broken chain. I mean, it's not even a chain anymore. It's just a broken pieces. That would be a good, I was going to say, you know, have like a chart or a diagram of all the holes involved with mail-in voting.
Yeah.
It would look like just a broken
Bunch of pieces.
bunch
on
of
the ground.
links of chains. Yeah, a bunch of links and no pieces connected to another. Right.
Wow.
So, yeah, and then, you know, when they get the ballots back one of the things I witnessed this firsthand. This is maybe good for people to know. So we were in here a couple elections ago in the Republican headquarters office here in Grants Pass, and this guy came in. No, actually, it was a young lady, and then later a guy. They came in the door. It was 7:30 at night on election night, and they said, "Hey, there's this guy getting into the ballot box across the street at the courthouse."
Yeah.
He totally looked shady. I think you guys should go check it out. So myself and Matt Morsa got up and we went over there, and we're like, oh man, what are we going to find? You know, and we go over there, and there are two guys kind of down behind the box there, and they had it open. They had the slot box, the ballot box thing open, and they were putting ballots into their bag. And we said, hey guys, hey, what's going on? You know, we just kind of confronted them, and they were like, oh hey. And we're like, well, so what are you guys doing? Oh, we're picking up the ballots. We're like, well, are you supposed to be doing that? They said, oh yeah, we work for the clerk's office, and it's getting right here at the end of the day, and we grab them every day. And we said, well, do you have some kind of ID or something? They were just like plain clothes, Joe Blow, not in uniform, no badge, no ID. They said, I think it was Matt, hey, do you guys, can we see some kind of identification that you're from the clerk's office? They're like, no. I mean, I got my driver's license, but we don't really have like an ID.
Wow.
And so we were like, how shady is this?
Yeah.
You know, and we're like, how do we know you guys are legit? And we're like, well, I mean, we're in that county vehicle over there. And so they had a pickup, I think it was a van or a pickup county, vehicle. And we're like, so we kind of hung out with those guys, and they finished opening. They had something like a clipboard. They wrote something, numbers or count of some kind. It looked like, I don't quite remember, but they were doing something, kind of busy work. And then we kind of watched them, and they got back, in the county vehicle and stuff. And we're like, I don't know, this just seemed really weird, And plus it was 7:30, and I thought was, well, it closes at 8. So shouldn't they have actually been here like after 8 or at 8? So that was really weird. Anyway, there was just that's a big fat hole.
Yeah.
And the fact that these guys don't look like they're clerk employees or anything, and they could, what if they weren't? And they broke into the box. And now they're stealing whatever, 600 ballots or something. You know, we have no idea. So there's, I mean, just hole after hole. And somebody did ask me in a forum recently, and I didn't quite answer it that way. They said, what would you do to improve the system? And I kind of was like, I don't want to try to put lipstick on a pig, you know, like just butcher the pig and have a great sausage fest, you know. I mean, this thing doesn't, I wouldn't want to fix this thing. It's like Frankenstein. I mean, it's like in really bad shape. So I kind of hesitated in that forum coming up with something that's positive about the current system, and the convenience of it or something was like the best thing I could think of is, oh, it's nice to have it convenient.
Yeah,
you know, but
it's not good.
No. So I'm convinced that, you know, that whole scenario of the chain of voting, and even after the ballots come in, by the way, then they go into this machine, a scanner that I talked to the clerk about, a clear ballot system scanner. And she says the IT department can't look at it. The county IT department's not allowed to touch it, not allowed to work on it, not allowed to look at it. She's not allowed to. She can only operate it. She says it's air gap, but when I talked to her, she didn't understand wireless, you know, cellular, Bluetooth, 802.2. You know, she didn't understand the network protocol. She didn't understand there's different ways to make this machine networked without a wire, right? Because she's saying air gap, meaning there's no wire plugging into a network, right? But most of us know with cell phones and laptops and tablets and all this cars, you don't have to have a wire for your device to be connected to the internet. So anyway, and the concern about hacking, and those scanners, even in the firmware. I've talked to people about firmware. Not everyone understands firmware, but I tell them it's like when your phone gets one of those major updates. If you have an iPhone or an Android, it says, hey, your phone needs a system update. That's really, usually you call that a firmware update. You know, so it's actually reprogramming the chips that are in your device. That could happen with a scanner, for example, that has communications, you know, in seconds. I mean, it can update the code that's actually on that reader device. The scanner's a reader. And that scanner could be reprogrammed on the fly by somebody, a bad actor, wherever.
Exactly.
Right? If they've got remote access. So I went through the calibration process with the clerk a couple cycles ago, and I had to hold my tongue. She asked for us not to speak when we observe, so I had to just watch. But the whole time I'm thinking, like, almost everything she was doing was just through a process that the vendor says you're supposed to do. And it's supposed to show that the machine's calibrated and it's going to read the ballots correctly. That's all fine. The concept's fine. But in reality, that could just be a show. And the scanner could be reprogrammed. It could be in test mode. It does one thing. When it's in actual scanning mode, it does another. Because she specifically puts it in test mode when she runs it. And she's running a test ballot through. She has to test the clerk has to test every ballot that is created for that election. So like I mentioned, there might be 47 different ballots. Well, all 47 need to have a test run. So that's quite a bit of testing for the calibration. You need to make sure it's going to read this, it's going to read that, it's going to read this, because each of those ballots will have different dots and different lines in different places, and so it has to be able to read those all uniquely and correctly. So, but my point to her at that time was, but you don't even know that anything you're doing is worth anything. Because again, things could change. It's in a test mode versus a reality mode, and I mean, just et cetera, et cetera. and the fact that air gap means nothing.
It doesn't.
It really doesn't. No. It's like one of those empty terms that they try to make it mean something, but it just doesn't really mean anything. So when it comes to security. And then, by the way, she takes the data off of that machine. It's actually a small desktop that's connected to the scanner. She takes the USB thumb drive that she has to get the data from the computer that the scanner scanned in. And so meanwhile, by the way, the data's sitting on a computer. So that's another potential problem, right? The computers can be
Yeah, it can fail.
It could fail. It could have interception. It could have someone could breach the computer system, again, wirelessly.
Yep.
But anyway, she puts in the thumb drive, and she believes that she carries it to her laptop. She takes that thumb drive to her laptop. She inserts it into her laptop, and it's her laptop. Now, I don't think she doesn't mean a personal laptop, but she calls it the one that she has in her office. And then she goes through the system on that machine to upload it to the Secretary of State.
Wow.
Well, now there's that data packet, basically. I don't know if it's zipped or what kind of maybe proprietary encapsulation tool they might have or not. I don't know if it's in the open or if it's encrypted. I don't know any of that.
Yeah.
But regardless, it goes from that USB port into that computer, then it goes through the wire, through the internet,
right,
to the Secretary of State's office. That could all be intercepted, right? In fact, I don't even actually know where the Secretary of State's cloud service is, or that communication link that she's counting on is actually taking it there. I don't know if there's a proxy server, which is like a server,
sure.
I know server in between,
yep.
right, that it's hitting. There was all kinds of things they spotted at a very high level, security level during the 2020 election and earlier ones too, where there were connections from machines to other countries' servers.
Yeah.
There was one in Italy that they found was connected. There was one in Spain that they found that was connected. So this data is actually going to these other proxy servers, wherever it is, and then back to where they're supposed to be.
Or China, or wherever.
Wherever, exactly. Because once it hits the internet, it could be anywhere on the planet,
yep.
right? Or a satellite, right, off the planet. So I tried there. I know this took way too much time for what we were expecting.
That's okay.
But there are so many holes. Somebody's got to do a diagram. And I haven't looked for one. Maybe it's already out there. But all the potential holes here in Oregon, people have to understand the difference between the ballot chain of custody of paper in person one day versus what I just described is astronomical.
It is. It's
like
huge.
The difference between it. I mean, yeah. So all that to say too, that all those holes, the potential holes. So, and I want to always say potential because I'm not saying that I have proof that there are violations, that people have intercepted
But
data.
you could find it if you were the clerk. I mean, you can kind of go through and take that stuff apart and see what you can find. And I mean,
well,
one county at a time. I know there's like you have to follow the state law, but
yeah, and contracts too.
Right.
So there's some problems there. Like if for example the hardware contract, software contract with ClearBallot states that no one can open this machine and no one can operate this OS in a normal mode. Like it's probably, I would imagine it's like in a kiosk mode. So kiosk mode really makes it really dumb. So basically it can only do the functions that it's designed to do, and it won't let you go in and go to settings or control panel and change your wallpaper or, like you can't go in and change anything on the system. And I would doubt that the clerk has authority to get into the machine. They have the responsibility for the machine. This is what I was talking about earlier. The clerk has the responsibility for running a solid election, but no authority to ensure it, because the clerk's not allowed to get into the machine. The clerk's not allowed by contract with ClearBallot. And I'm presupposing from my understanding that that's the way it is. IT's not allowed. She did tell me that IT is not allowed to look at it. And no one is, you're only supposed to operate it.
So we're being held hostage here.
Yeah, by a vendor who has proprietary, that's what they call it. So you can't see our code, our election software code. That's a lot of other states deal with that. They actually have election software. The closest thing we have to election software is that scanning software and the communication software that connects it to the Secretary of State. I'm sure she's not emailing an attached file.
No, probably not. It's probably a little bit more secure than that.
Yeah, I would hope. Right, they're probably sending it through, it would be a VPN tunnel or something more sophisticated they should be using, but to try to keep that data secure. But regardless, my hope is to be able to match authority with responsibility as a clerk, and the clerk's responsibility can be satisfied with the proper authority to make sure an election is being run, so that there is no doubt. The goal is, and I mentioned this in a forum the other day too, and there weren't a lot of people that were happy to hear it, but that there's so many holes right now that what I would be trying to promote is trust in every voter
Right.
that the election is legitimate.
Yeah.
And again, some people, kind of wince at that, and they're like, "What? I mean, there's conspiracy theorists all over the place,
Yeah,
and they
sure.
throw that label around, and they're always going to doubt that the election's solid when they lose."
Yeah.
And like you were saying that earlier too, like when people win, they're like, "Hey, the system's fine."
Yeah.
But when you lose, you're on the losing side. You're like, "Wait, there's a lot of doubt here," and it's totally natural and legitimate is the problem, unless you see it and there's clear chain of custody on those ballots. Why should someone just take it for granted? People fought for the right to vote. People died for the right to vote.
Exactly.
And it's way more serious than Oregon has treated it for decades. Right. And I think a lot of people have just gotten used to it. It's a little bit like the frog in the boiling pot thing,
right?
Where over time you start to realize, hey, the water's fine.
Yeah, sure.
What could possibly be wrong? And until Democrats have been in control of the state legislature and the Capitol for a while, right? So the governor's mansion. If the shoes were put on the other feet, there's no doubt we've seen it in other states. The Democrats would be saying, "Hey, something's wrong.
Something's wrong with the voting system.
How'd those guys win? They're losers."
Yeah.
And something's wrong with the voting system. Look, we had Jimmy Carter, one of the very popular Democrat presidents in the 70s. He went and did a commission after he left the presidency. In fact, I think they called the report the Carter Commission when they finished it.
Right.
And it showed that mail-in voting was the most risky, unreliable voting system you could possibly have.
Yeah.
They didn't envision an electronic voting like the internet voting system that some people are trying to dream about, because that would be even worse. But they rated it as the worst. It was impossible. They realized and concluded after all their studies, it was impossible to have a legitimate mail-in voting system, vote-by-mail system. And that was the Carter Commission. And then later, you had other famous Democrats, by the way, and I'm only saying Democrats, so there's been Republicans too, but Democrats specifically because they are in power in Oregon. But Amy Klobuchar, she's well-known, and Kamala Harris got on board this too, former vice president, but also former presidential candidate. Kamala. Is that how you say her name?
Yeah, Kamala. Yeah,
Kamala or Kamala? Is it Kamala? They argued about that.
Apples, oranges, right?
Anyway,
potato.
So yeah, that's what I thought, but she took it very personally when you said it wrong. So I apologize for not knowing how to pronounce her name. But Kamala Harris, Amy Klobuchar, I think Elizabeth Warren got on board too. They were all saying that mail-in voting must be outlawed. And they were adamant about that. And that was in the late 20-teens, right? So just less than 10 years ago, they were complaining about it. They were like, "This is horrible." And I don't know specifically if they were voting if they were pointing at Oregon's voting system. I don't remember that.
Yeah.
But they were looking at mail-in voting, bringing it into their states, and that's what they were saying. No way.
Yeah, no way.
No way, because this mail-in voting is filled and ripe with ability to trash it. And so, look, those are a bunch of very prominent Democrats. Of course, the top of the ticket, Kamala Harris, she was running for president, and that was her view.
Exactly.
And Amy Klobuchar, she's been a very popular senator. She's running for governor right now in Minnesota, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah. So, anyway, it's obvious that Oregon is really suffering from having a very poor election system, and the lack of trust, that chases away voters. People say, "Oh, you have to have mail-in voting because look at our participation. Participation's horrendous. It's still down in the 30%."
Because of that. I mean, it's because of that. That's the root of the issue.
I've talked to several people. I had a former general manager for the company I worked for, and I asked him because he's a good guy, a good American, good solid American. Hardworking guy, worked his way up from the bottom of the company, worked his way up to general manager. And I asked him, why don't you vote anymore? He goes, "I stopped voting 10 years ago. It's just a waste. I don't believe our votes count. We vote for people, we get them in there, and of course they end up being somebody else." And so, so he was discouraged by voting in general, but he specifically said, "I have no idea that those my vote matters. It seems like no matter what we do, the other side always wins.
Yeah.
And so he was a Republican, by the way. He was a conservative. But he was like, yeah, it's just pointless. He just gave up, total apathetic voter, because he didn't trust the system, and he didn't trust the entire political system.
A lot of people feel the same way.
Yeah. It's just, and so until we fix the election system in Oregon specifically, we're not going to have peace. We're not going to have unity. We're not going to have confidence. We're not going to have high voter turnout. Because it's just, people feel like they're totally discouraged, and disenfranchised is one of the good key words, because they feel like their vote doesn't count. So I would want to, as a little old clerk in Josephine County, which I don't have power over a lot as a clerk, there is authority and responsibility that needs to be there according to the charter and rules from the Secretary of State's office, and even the Oregon Constitution dealing with voting. It needs to be taken care of.
So, and then proponents of mail-in voting, it's like older people, retired people, stuff like that. People that are disabled, they can't come in and vote. What do you say to them?
Well, yeah, so thank you. That's a really good point. And I was glad that I remembered to mention something in my last forum that I was in. For a long, long time, and I don't know when it started, but it was a long time ago, the country's always had absentee voting.
Absentee voting.
Absentee voting is the way to do that. It's not hard. You literally say, hey, I have a hard time getting to my polling place, and I would like to get a ballot so I can vote from home. And you literally sign up for it, a little 3x5 card or online. You say, hey, I'm going to sign up for my ballot. And they, if you have a valid reason, which there's a whole list of valid reasons, then the clerk can then set you up for being an absentee voter. An absentee voter, a ballot has very similar process to the mail-in voting, but they're just restricted in number. So you can't have thousands and thousands suddenly show up like they do, and there still has to be an ID, and they have to certify that it's them. And, there's several, and signature verification, there's all that stuff on it still. But it's like, you're supposed to sign on the envelope just like today, so you would still get your ballot. So those people are still taken care of. The people in the retirement homes that can't get out, any kind of shut in, any kind of incapacitated person, as far as physically incapacitated, they would still be an absentee voter.
Okay.
And that's fantastic. I'm totally in favor of that. There are some people who are against that too, by the way, and I don't think that's right. You need to have absentee voting.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah. Or military overseas.
Yeah.
Well, good luck to you, and hopefully we'll see what happens. I mean, the ballots are out. Everybody's got their ballots.
Oh yeah, ballots out yesterday, and it's exciting, but it's also kind of nerve-wracking, because I know there's so many people that don't know. I'm glad you're doing this video.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that don't know about who to vote for, who the candidates are, or even how important it is.
Yeah.
They might know president, they know governor. So education helps a lot, and people want to be educated. They're like, hey, I'm busy, I'm working.
So you want to talk to them.
Yeah, I don't have time, and so I didn't know. And
I mean, I'd love to get to all three clerks, but I'm just like one podcaster, and I saw you, and I was like, Darius, do you got a second?
Right.
I mean, this was very impromptu.
yeah, I don't even know what time it is, but
So
yeah, hopefully this works out. But, and there's a lot more, by the way, we could say, but that would have to be for part 2.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Thank you, Darius.
Thank you very
Appreciate
much. All right.